Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about overcoming adversity and finding your way. Before we get into our great guest today, I want to once again remind everybody that I have come out with this book, also the same name of the podcast, called Finding Your Summit: How to Build Resilience and Faith to Rise Above Life's Challenges. And we all have challenges and we all have to rise up, otherwise you fall over. We're going to get into that a little bit more today. Also, if you want me to come in and blow up your organization with a keynote speech, I do a lot of that. I've had a TEDx talk not too long ago, and I've been over in Montenegro speaking. You can go to my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com, and I've got all kinds of content located there. On that note, let's go to my great guest today, Doug Crandall. Doug, how you doing?
Good, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
I'm not sure if we're both from the home state, but you are residing not too far from where I actually grew up in Seattle. You're up in Bellevue, Washington, and hopefully it's a great day and to be in the state of Washington.
Absolutely, Mark. I am. You can barely see it here, but this is actually a picture of my oldest son. He was a Husky football manager. I'm born and raised about 20 minutes where you're from. So,
Yeah, yeah, no, just nothing but wonderful memories. Actually, this is kind of a side thing, but it is and it isn't because it ties into this conversation. About a month and a half ago, I was asked to come up to the University of Washington and speak to the football team, which I did. And a lot of what I talked about was the pyramid of success and how I got there and what Coach James taught me. I just showed you this book that I'm reading, Thursday Speeches. I'll show to anybody who's watching this on
hmm.
YouTube. Don James, written by Peter Tormey, Lessons in Life, Leadership, and Football. We're going
Hmm.
to talk about that here in a minute. But I think this is what so much of today's theme is all about is the lack of leadership. And you have a new book that's out there I'm going to promote, Building or Diminishing,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And so it's such a fascinating topic, and there's a lot I want to get into to this about this because either you're moving forward or you're going back. It's just pretty simple to me. And when you're stuck in the middle, there's nothing worse because you're not doing either. And today, as we talked about before we went live, is so much has to do with the leadership and the lack of, and people not really having the road trip because they've never been taught because that's not what they did do in school. You go through, you graduate, you move on to a role. You've been taught how to do that role, which is marketing or creative or accounting or something, but you've never been taught how to lead not only yourself but others, right? So I want to talk about that. Let's go back and like set this up a little bit, and then I'm going to shut up. Which is you went to West Point, and I can only imagine what that was like. I had an opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy out of high school. I wasn't mature enough. I was mature enough to understand I wasn't mature enough to actually go do that. But you certainly seem to be much more mature than me. But um, let's go back to West Point and what kind of effect that had on you in terms of we'll lead up to this book that you wrote.
Yeah, Mark. Really, two stops at West Point. I mentioned that because the second one probably even had a deeper effect. But I went there out of high school. Uh, I think my dad had gone there. And I think an interesting about it is my dad grew up during the Depression. He was 7, 8 years old in 1938, 39. He grew up in Missouri with a single mom. And so I had heard stories about him getting one pair of shoes a year. He enlisted as a Marine, went to West Point, and the reason I bring all that up is he had almost a romantic notion of West Point because it changed his life, and skipped over some of just the things that were really hard. It's changed a bit since certainly since my dad went there, even since when I went there to focus a little bit away from hazing and more on leader development. But it was really hard. I was lonely. I was across the country, and you get put through the grind. You're getting yelled a lot that first year.
Yeah.
So a lot of those things were super hard. I mentioned the second part because I got a chance to go back there and teach and see it from a different perspective. And when I was there teaching in the early 2000s, got to see how what a huge part reflection is in leader development. And I bring that up because you're talking about kind of people just, they do great at their jobs. We see a lot of that in the healthcare industry, where a great doctor becomes the chief of a clinic or a chief resident. And they've never been taught to lead. And so it's sort of unintentional. They're just going through the motions or not really thinking about how they're impacting other people. And that second chance to teach at West Point, really the whole place is this laboratory through sports, through summer leadership opportunities, even during the academic year, you're given leadership positions at West Point. And really, the goal is for you to make mistakes, be thrown in situations that aren't life or death, and then to process what you're learning from those situations. And we have essays to that effect in our core leadership class, where you think about what happened this summer. What did I learn from that as a leader?
Yep. Are you still with me? Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, you froze for just half a second. Yeah, no, I get everything you're trying to say, and I assume I'm going to have you comment on this, even though I'm assuming that you know this, and this is kind of what you just said, that you can't effectively lead unless you lead yourself first,
Yeah.
and that comes with a whole set of core values and your North Star and things like that. So comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in all the leadership programs we've been doing for a couple of decades now, we start almost everywhere we go. It's an immutable part of what we do. And we do half day stuff to 6 month stuff. But even when we're doing half day stuff, at least a little bit on what do I believe and why do I believe it? Like, what are the 4 or 5 things that no matter what, um, I'm not gonna compromise on. They're gonna be part of who I am. How a certain way that we treat people or integrity, whatever it might be. And we focus on that so much because then the rest of leadership is about the people you're leading. Does this person, I mean, does this person actually like to be pushed really hard, or does this person need to be handled a little bit differently? People, I think, bring so much and think, how am I going to lead without thinking about the people they're actually leading and how they need to adapt to each person, to adapt to a group, or adapt to the situation, what the mission is at hand. And so, yeah, that first part though is before you do any of that, locking in, like, what do I believe? Why do I believe it?
How did you get that gig that you talked about that um, second placement in your life? First it was as a student and then now as a teacher. How did you get that gig?
Yeah, it's a cool model at the academy. About 2/3 of the faculty are active duty, young, 31, 32-year-old Army officers who've been sent to get master's degrees and come back to teach calculus, come back to teach history. I had the great opportunity to come back and teach the core leadership class. You apply, it's a pretty competitive process for active duty Army officers. But I was really put onto it, as I mentioned, by my dad. He had gotten out of the Army after his initial service commitment in the late 50s, but had said one thing he wished he'd always done was gone back to West Point and taught. And it really, for me, was a choice between kind of the same thing, getting out of the Army in the late 90s, or applying to teach at West Point. So I was given that chance. I actually got an incredible chance just 2 years ago to go back as a civilian, which is not as common and not a systemic process. I just saw on a buddy's LinkedIn post that they were looking for somebody literally just for 10 months to come, no moving expenses, just come teach this leadership class for 10 months because they had a hole to fill. So I've had a few great opportunities to go back there and be immersed in the leader development process there.
And what do you find about today's student compared to way back when we were going? Has that changed as the personality? Is it a different kid that's growing up? There's so much more. We grew up in an era where there's no cell phones, right? There's no
Yeah.
notifications, there's no internet, it was all dial up. And I mean, the world is just, even the way we fight war, right? With drones. I mean, flying these things that look like 747s and they carrying bombs and there's no pilot on board. I mean, it's insane. So, like, what what is that type of kid today that and maybe it's the same kid.
Yeah, Mark, it's interesting. I think there's probably people who would disagree with me, but at least at West Point, a service academy, and probably some other places where you got to really do really hard stuff. I mean, you are getting up at 5:45 every day, pretty much for the entire 4 years. You might be able to push that till 6:05. But you're getting up, you're going to bed pretty much at midnight. You're taking 20 credits a semester. I found that they really hadn't changed, in my opinion. Maybe it's the way I was looking upon them, but I'll take, for example, the United States Army's Ranger School, which I will say immediately, I am not a graduate of. I did not go through it. It's primarily an infantry school, but a lot of non-infantry soldiers go through it. But it's 60 days at a minimum, out in the woods in Georgia, in Florida, almost no sleep, almost no food, and you get pushed to the brink to get through this Army Ranger infantry school. That hasn't changed. I mean, it might have changed a little bit. Some people would argue with that, but the structure of that, no food, no sleep, that hasn't changed in decades. And so the kids that went through it in the 90s, the kids that went through it in the 70s are this, have to be pretty much the same makeup as some of the kids that I taught. I just went to a graduation for that school in the spring. They went through it this time. So, I mean, I think kids that are signed up to serve the country and do hard stuff like that haven't changed a ton. One thing that I did see, I'd almost point to the culture of the academy rather than the leaders, the young leaders that are there, is the willingness to correct somebody else is probably less than it used to be. You know, the school used to be built around like crushing plebes with like with discipline. Plebes are freshmen, crushing those freshmen with discipline, and there wasn't really a problem of people telling somebody else what to do. Uh, Kids are a little friendlier now, is the way I would put it. Maybe a little more social because of their phones, but they were just more hesitant to hold others accountable from what I saw. That concerned me a little bit because part of your job when you're a 23-year-old lieutenant is to if you have to hold a more experienced like non-commissioned officer accountable. But overall, I saw a great group of young men and women that didn't really seem much different to me.
Yeah, I mean, to me that kind of when you talk about that, I go back a little bit to this environment where everybody gets a trophy, everybody gets a
Yeah,
ribbon,
yeah,
right? So there's
right.
either, when you and I were growing up, there's either a winner or a loser. And so you either won the championship, and this is like Little League, or you didn't.
Yeah,
And you didn't, even if you took fifth place, you still didn't get a trophy and a ribbon for participation, right? It's just all part of the thing of goal setting and going forward. And I noticed a little bit of the same thing at the UW. At the end of the day, it gets down to the fundamentals, and I'm talking about the football team now. And so you still got to work, you still got to grind. Now they're doing it earlier, and maybe it's changed a little bit in terms of all the 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 access that they have to gyms and coaches and select football and those types of things. But I can identify with what you said. It takes a certain kind of kid to get into those military. You have to have the senators typically, write a letter of recommendation and things like this. And so whether it's the Air Force or it's going to West Point or something like that, I mean, it does take a special kind of breed of kid of maturity too, I think, for that age 17 to go, you know what, I can't wait to go sign up for this thing and get my ass chewed.
yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, for sure. And then you throw in like I think about a couple of the athletes I taught, and I got real close to a basketball player who was still going through the same stuff of not getting the playing time he wanted. In the meantime, he's trying to get his homework done for, the paper he had to write for my class, and just this
Yeah.
kid's tough as nails. I mean, it gave me hope, honestly, that our future's in good hands, like truly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the book, Building or Diminishing. Why did you write this book?
Yeah, it's Mark, it's interesting. I think we have four kids. We're empty nesters now. For the last 3 years of our youngest son's kind of high school experience, he lived with just his mom and I. He's the last one, so we got to spend a lot of up close time with him. And I just started thinking to myself as I was leading him, because parenting is absolutely a leadership endeavor.
Mhm.
I started thinking, as should I say this to him or not? Like, does it do him any good for me to say this? And it's really kind of unfortunate maybe for the first our oldest son, and then as you go along you just learn stuff through experience and reflection. But so I started saying to myself, am I building or diminishing him with what I'm saying? And if I'm not building him, and building, as we get into in the book, can mean I'm pushing you because I think you can do better. Like I expect more of you. It's not a soft concept, but is there a purpose in what I'm saying? And I threw that on a slide one day when we were teaching, really teaching, talking about leading others and meeting people where they're at. And it really resonated with the group. I layered this in with a quote actually from a mentor of mine, a guy named Bruce Brown. Jim Mora would know Bruce Brown. I think he probably
Mhm.
taught Jim when Jim was in junior high. And Bruce, a quote I saw he posted on LinkedIn said, the most effective leaders are unapologetically demanding and relentlessly positive.
Mhm.
And so I was like, shoot, well, like then everything that you're saying should be kind of a combination of those things as a leader. And we started to build a keynote out of it. And in a 6 months program that we were teaching in North Carolina a couple of years ago, there was a person who came up at the end of the program and said that question, like think to yourself, am I building or diminishing? Ask yourself that when you're leading other people, was the most impactful part of our program. And we really leave it up to people after 6 months together to reflect and take their own lessons away. What was the most important part of this? So it just started to stick. I saw it sticking with people and decided to build it into a book. And it's really a book about my own journey to aspire to be a builder, to build this question into my habit of leadership.
One of the things that that I saw and I experienced a lot, and I was very blessed and fortunate through a lot of hard work, but to make it all the way to the top of the rung to be in the NFL. And so I got to experience a lot of coaches, and it was interesting because going back to what you're saying about you're either building or diminishing, there was either positive coaching or negative coaching.
Hmm.
And like I could have had the most insane catch on the field in the last moments under extreme pressure, fans going cuckoo, and he'd find the one thing that I did wrong versus just like build on what we did.
Yeah,
And by the way, we can also work on this a little part a little bit and just
yeah,
constantly focus on that. And I think what you said is that, and for anybody that's listening to this, and I'm saying this now after running a big part of Sports Illustrated for the last 10 years and over 300 different people within that organization on the team network, is that each and every single person is driven differently. And you
yeah.
got to really understand, personalities and what are you going to be able to get the most amount of juice over because not all personalities like can hear you or respond to you the same way that you want that kind of result on the other side of it.
100%, Mark, and that is it, and that's a challenge as a leader either way, right? I mean, if you're used to being super positive, and I thought about this, I coached high school basketball for a number of years, coached my kids, so about 20 years of coaching under my belt, which was another journey of just trying to get better all the time. But even in writing this book, I looked back and thought about a couple players who I was really relationship focused, and I was good at building their confidence. But I watched them go into like D1, one of them going to become a D1 college basketball player who became first team all conference in like a mid major. And I saw her coach really push her in a way I think I didn't and realized, like I was being who I thought, like who I wanted to be. I wanted to be building her up in practice.
Uh,
But I think she really, in certain ways, that was helpful to her, but she wanted to be pushed as well. So it's both ways. I mean, it's really an important part of leading, like really stepping back and it not being about you, but it being about what the people you lead need.
Well, I think sometimes too, expectations and transparency are key in everything that we're talking about here,
Mhm.
right? So going up to that player, that example that you just talked about, and go, look, I'm going to push your ass like you've never been
Yeah,
pushed. It's going to come across as like mean and heartfelt, but I'm trying to get you because I think you have that potential to go to X, spot, the WNBA or college or whatever that you're talking about. And in order to do that, I need to push these certain buttons. And so I just wanted to set that expectation up front. Are we good? Yeah, we're good. Great.
I
Let's
love
go.
that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's a wonderful point for sure. Just that
Yeah.
little thing is a huge difference.
So kind of let's jump back into to what, how does our communication land and what to expect, right? And you in this book point out that there's some like four essentially these four different amount levels. I'll call them, and you can redefine these
Sure.
here in a second. A builder, a driver, a cheerleader, or a belittler. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what we just talked about, right? If you're not leading in the right way and it's not positive, then it's negative. So it's the opposite of that. So builder, driver, cheerleader, and then you knock people down. So just walk me through that in terms of how we all kind of communicate, because people that listen to this podcast, and there's quite a few that do. I think I think just we always pull things out, and like you're asking yourself, say if you're going to enough effort to go listen to some of these podcasts, and I've been doing this now, you'll be like 310. So that's
Huh.
a lot of episodes, right? And it's like, what kind of nugget can I extract that's going to make me a better person and a better leader? So let's talk about those: builder, driver, cheerleader, be leader.
Yeah, you bet, Mark. And I do this all the time. I might overqualify it, but I'm not huge on labeling people. I actually say that in the book. At the
Yeah.
same time, a construct like this is how a lot of people think. So it's done to be helpful and as a reflective tool, and literally say in the book not to put anybody in a box. But I have seen it with some really high level people, some friends who've just sent me text messages after reading the book, help people think about where they're at. And the two most important quadrants in that grid, I think, are the cheerleader and the driver. And so it just has two axes, and one of them is how we communicate. Do we tend to be more building in our communication or diminishing? Or are we always telling people that they need to get better, that they're not doing good enough? Or Are we finding what people are doing right, giving them the confidence and they can get stuff done? I would say even to what you just said earlier about that expectation is building type communication. I'm going to come up to you and say, hey, I'm going to be pushing you, but it's because I see something in you. So it's
Hmm.
not about a particular, you have to be this way or whatever, but thinking about the words that come out of your mouth. Even we go to things like how fast you answer a text. I mean, I think all of us, some of us are neurotic, and if I text somebody and I don't hear back from them for days, I'm wondering what they're thinking.
Yeah.
If that's my leader, like now I'm really thinking about it. Like, why hasn't she texted me back? So we point to some of those examples. But drivers in the top left tend to have like diminishing communication or just don't really tell you you're doing a good job, but super high standards. And they get results and they can and I actually use the example of Herb Brooks from the 1980 Olympic hockey team.
Yeah.
And I do that on purpose to show this isn't, I'm not trying to say like this is bad or whatever. It's just a reflective tool. He had a mission. They had 6 months. He picked a group of hockey players that he knew he could drive, and he drove them. And he never told them they were doing a good job. And
Yeah.
you can watch the Netflix documentary and see that they never
I,
really heard.
the guy, I mean, I like quote unquote, the guy was a total dick. I mean,
Yeah,
absolute, right? I mean, he was just an ass. And the interesting thing about that documentary is that the players, I don't think, really got it until almost to the end,
right,
what he
right.
was actually trying to do to then for them to all collectively, win that award, which was the gold medal back in 1980.
Absolutely, and it's funny because you can't so you can't question him, and I love that event. I used it on purpose because it was incredible. But could he have even been a little more effective if he told him at the outset like what he was doing, or just occasionally thrown in like, "Hey, I believe in you," or whatever it might be. But really a reflective tool. You move down kind of kitty corner to cheerleader, and these are people who are constantly building your confidence, building a relationship, telling you can do it, but rarely pushing you to achieve more, or sometimes like don't have the tough conversations because they don't want to hurt your feelings or they don't whatever it might be. And so just putting those out there, those to aspire to builder, which is in the top right, where I do both. Like I push you, I'm constantly telling you that we expect excellence, we're going to win, we're going to climb mountains, and I believe in you. You did well yesterday. Hey, fix this. You're better than that. Like the ways that communicate that get us to show I believe in you. At the same time, I'm going to be relentlessly positive. And then the bottom left is
So
belittler, which is
hold on. Let me jump into that really quick.
you bet.
As you brought his name up earlier, so I'll bring it up right now. Jim Mora. So Jim Mora Jr., head coach now at Colorado State, has been in the NFL as a head coach and UCLA and other places. But he's my best friend, and I'm actually
Hmm.
heading out to his first game here in a couple of weeks. And we talked about this stuff all the time, right? We love talking about this stuff. And I think there's a lot of super positive coaches that are out there, but don't survive it. The reason why Jim is the new head coach at Colorado State is because the guy before him, who is a great coach and a good dude and super positive, and I'm not saying I don't know anything about the program other than at the end of the day, they lost over a series of years, and because it's so based on wins and losses and revenue and everything else, that
Hmm.
you win, you stay,
Yeah,
and you lose and you get fired, and that's what happened. But when we talk about keeping this on the gym side, is that one of the reasons why he's had insane success is because of what you were just talking about, the builder and the driver, and those also equate to standards that
yeah,
you must have so you can also be positive. But if you have to drive because somebody crossed that line or they're not living up to those standards, right? You're holding them then accountable to then succeed in a way that you can keep it positive, but you can chew their ass out too because they did not live up what you already articulated, what the standard is that they need to be if they want to be part of that program.
absolutely. Yeah, kind of a couple things you've said brings us together. I just saw the quote on LinkedIn, and I say that in the book because I don't remember it was just a friend or a friend of a friend, and I didn't want to take credit for it, but I wanted to use it. It said that um, clarity of expectation is a much more important tool than clarity of correction. And
Mm.
it's kind of what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
let's make it clear. I found in my own life, often as a coach, sometimes when I was leading in the military, if I did make it clear, whether it was that core value we talked about earlier, or we're just being on time is non-negotiable this organization, then when it happens, it's not a it doesn't you don't have to get stressed out about correcting it. Like you don't have to build up that anxiety to go talk to somebody about the standard because we've made it super clear. And so yeah, it's those type of things like that get you, I think, to get us all to builder, and it's a journey I'm still on. But it's such a you can feel it when you're there. You can feel it by when you're led by somebody who does it this way. That it's just different. And we use a couple examples in the book. There are a lot of sports examples in the book. The one we use is I'll leave the story for people to read if they want. But a young woman named Maggie Dixon who coached women's basketball at West Point. That when you look back at what she did, it truly, Pat Summitt, I think, is another
Yeah.
potential example. So,
Love that. Okay, so builder, driver, let's move on to cheerleader.
yeah, and this is the one that I've had messages from a lot of friends who've been incredibly successful. I mean, I have a close friend. I actually use him a little bit in the book that was the CEO of a company we've all heard of when he was 40 years old. And he's a Harvard Business School graduate, one of the best leaders you've been around. But we were even doing some, I'd call it executive coaching, but it was the two of us kind of just hanging out and talking for a number of months. And he looked at this concept and was like, boy, I've got colleagues, and what I admire about them is like if they hired a B player and that B player wasn't working out, they'd cut him loose. And like this guy has really good teams because he's not afraid to just cut people loose. And he had this tension because there was some downside in that, not like the families come into consideration. Did you give the person a chance? Did you believe in them? But he's like, I've got a couple people and I just don't do that. Like I make excuses for them or I do their work for them. And this is an incredibly successful leader. This isn't some mediocre guy who's telling me this stuff. And he identified this cheerleader notion in himself. He's like, I've got to. And I actually said to him, well, have you talked to this person about it? Like, and he's like, no, I haven't. And he sat down and thought about what he needed to say and went and had the conversation. So and I think it is resonating with colonels in the army that I've talked to everybody. And there's nothing grand or like incredible about this idea. It's just, I think there's something about asking this building or diminishing question and thinking about it from a driver cheerleader perspective that helps people like just reflect on who they are as a leader wherever they are in their journey.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the last one, which nobody wants to be. I mean, nobody wants to get chewed and you can't do it, you'll never make it. I mean, there's lots of examples in history of people being like that. And that typically, to me at least, goes back to whatever trauma that person had growing up as a kid. They got
Yeah.
their ass beat up or something. I don't know. But let's talk about that and what, none of us obviously strive to be.
Yeah, the belittler is an interesting one because we do experience it. I mean, I think or we've been there, and I think this comes a lot of times. Like when I tried to really look at, hey, when was I've been a belittler? I think there were times when I was in the army where I got caught, and I would say, I mean, it's kind of making an excuse, but we're impacted by the environment we're in, and so I was getting yelled at, I was getting chewed out, there was all kinds of pressure. I didn't handle it well, and I wasn't reflecting on how I was leading, and so I ended up passing it downhill. Being demeaning to people. Basically, it's the leader who doesn't think much of people and tells them they suck, right? And it is. I think it is. You hit it right on. It's associated with people's own trauma, with a lack of reflection, but it's toxic and it's damaging. It doesn't get results for an organization and it damages people.
Yeah, I think as leaders too, there's, this kind of two personalities that we all float out there. There's this type A. I mean, certainly
Mm.
I've probably fallen in that category, and there's type B. And one is pushing and the other one's pulling. And so you have
Mm.
this push-pull effect, right? And so the real question is like, how do you come together, especially when you're talking about, I'm not talking about necessarily a football team, although that could be, or some kind of athletic team, but within an organization. And within the organization, you have to learn how to deal with all types of people and
Yeah,
without like being, accountable, setting the standards, but not chew people and cut them down just because they don't run at the same speed as you, right? You just got to
100%.
know what kind of, again, just really understanding what kind of beast is in your zoo, right? To be able to lift people up and with the whole organization, the goal being to lift it to a whole different place. And that's the key for anything. But like you said, you'll never get the maximum results out of anybody if you just, take them apart.
Absolutely, Mark. And bringing it back to kind of where we started in a certain sense with thinking about the military academy and why I pointed to that second experience teaching there is it does all like it really comes back to, hey, what did I do yesterday or what did I do last week and how did I screw that up or what did I do well and how do I grow myself as a leader and this willingness to do that, to just not have it be all about the numbers, the results, but realize that the impact that you're having on people as a leader matters, and that the only person who can change that is you. So I got to reflect on the experiences I'm having to grow myself.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Okay. Are you out on the um, speaking circuit at all? Are you getting out there, or is this book just launching? How's that all coming together?
Yeah, Mark, we I launched the book about a month ago. I do 4 or 5 keynotes a year. They're
Yeah.
all kind of grassroots and organic. Being more intentional about this effort, honestly. All the money from this book in particular, and we did this intentionally at the reference group where I work, is going to a nonprofit called Tunnel to Towers, which pays off the mortgages for Gold Star families who have lost a spouse
Wow.
in combat, or builds houses actually for first responders. And we did that because I believe in this concept enough. I mean, I've been doing leader development for 25 years. It's a simple concept, but I've watched it already change people. I've gotten, like I said, messages from people who said, "Hey, I just had this conversation with my adult daughter last week, and I was totally diminishing. And like, I need to go back to her and apologize and be a builder." And so I wanted to be free from self-interest in promoting this. And so we're giving all the proceeds to Tunnel the Towers for the book. Absolutely trying to get out there and speak. The website is buildingyourdiminishing.com, where people can go for that. But yeah, I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I've always loved the relationship of it, loved helping people grow, and really haven't tried to build kind of a business out of it other than what came. But in this case, doing it a little differently. So absolutely ready to go do that.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've taken it seriously and you're good at it, and you had a great, in going to West Point, certainly teed you up to be and understand what leadership means, and really trying to tap into the potential of everybody, because everybody, has the potential, I'll use that word again, to be the best version of themselves, and so many people aren't, just because they don't know how to lead and set goals and be accountable and set standards, over
Absolutely.
and over.
Yeah, I mean, I have a good friend from high school, and we sent this book out to like our Christmas list, kind of just sent it out to people. And she's a second grade teacher down in California, and wrote me back and said she bought a copy for everybody. She leads professional development at her elementary school and wanted people to read it. There's an example. My wife was a kindergarten teacher, and I use her as an example of a cheerleader, and where that comes from for her in the book. So we when we teach at our leadership development programs, we don't define leadership. We simply say you're a leader if people are following you. And we
Yeah.
believe that. It's in so many areas of life, and truly feel like this is a concept for everybody.
Love it, love it. Okay, where can people find you? You just mentioned this book. Is there any place online where if somebody wants to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, I'll connect with whoever wants to reach out on LinkedIn. And then buildingyourdiminishing.com is our website for this book, which also has a connection to the reference group, the boutique consulting firm or leadership development firm I work with.
Yeah, and then you can buy this book where?
At
Probably
Amazon.
at
Amazon
Amazon.
primarily, and then we will sell copies directly, 10 or more via the website, and then all the proceeds, 100% of them go to Tunnel to Towers if we do that
Yeah,
instead of
yeah.
Amazon. Yeah.
Love that. Good stuff. Good stuff. You lead by example, and that's so important today. Um, for anybody else out there, make sure you subscribe to this channel, whatever you're listening to today. And I just really appreciate you coming on. Just killer conversation. I mean, there's more people I wish in the world that were like you.
Well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. That
Yeah.
sounds like
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. All right. There he is, the one, the only Doug Crandall. Thank you so much.